going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets. Chris Meaney and Adam Pfeifer here with you, a Pfeifer24 on the X Machine, formerly known as Twitter, the senior NFL and NBA analyst here joining us to talk a little NFL. It's been a crazy week in the NFL, a lot of movement, especially at the running back position. There's still some names out there as well as we creep closer to the NFL draft. So appreciate, Adam, your time here. If you guys are watching our YouTube page, we are running a promo right now. FTN March, 35% off over at FTN Bets, FTNDaily.com. And if you're listening on iTunes and Spotify, why don't you hop on over, subscribe to our YouTube page, smash the like button. You have any questions for Adam and I, always circling back on these videos. Pfeifer, man, appreciate you jumping in. And it really has been a crazy week in the NFL. We love the NFL. It never stops. Love the player movement and the chaos. This time last year, you and I were chatting before we went live here. It felt like some of these running backs like Saquon and Pollard and Jacobs and Ekeler, like these guys wanted to get paid and they weren't getting paid. We were wondering like where to draft them in fantasy. Were they going to get paid? They got tagged. They didn't get the contract they wanted. And now these guys have all gotten paid and it's been good for the running back market out there. And what do you think it says about maybe the draft in particular in terms of running backs? Is that part of it? You feel like maybe it's just not as strong as last year and years prior?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. And it definitely helps because a lot of people that obviously have been following and covering the league for a long time, they've pointed out too that this is, even though the position has been devalued a bit over the years, this is still one of the best free agent running back classes we've had, right? I mean, we look at Derrick Henry, future Hall of Fame running back. Saquon Barkley, I don't know if he's on that trajectory, but Hall of Fame talent, absolutely. Josh Jacobs, Tony, like really, really good players. So I think it's a combination of both, but definitely like this draft class, like on top of the fact, like on the opposite end of the spectrum, look at the wide receivers. I know the Calvin Ridley situation has been mostly due to the stipulation of Jacksonville, where if he would have signed before today's 4:00 deadline, it would have been a second-round pick to Atlanta. If it's after, it's a third-round pick. So I think that's part of it. But we've really only seen like Gabe Davis and Darnell Mooney at wide receiver for the most part, and that's probably because why pay? And Gabe Davis got a really hefty contract, so did Mooney. But like this is a loaded wide receiver class, so I think it's really interesting. And I've talked about this a lot. This is my favorite time of the year to cover fantasy football and football. I love watching football every Sunday. I love that, but this is the best time of year. I love it. And I can't even imagine if I still did baseball content during this time of year, but I haven't done baseball in like 4 years now. So I can't imagine how that's going.
Yeah, you step back, you watch your Cavs play, they're playing awesome, and you sit and you watch all these moves. I mean, it is the best time of the year. I love the player movement. And what does it mean? Winners and losers. And we'll dive into that. Maybe a little bit of a dynasty spin. It is a great time to buy low and sell high on certain players as well. I think before the draft, of course, you could get burned when certain teams do things, in the draft. Like, for example, Detroit, they get Montgomery. It's like, oh, Montgomery, great. But then they go and draft Jahmyr Gibbs. So you'll see some teams do things like that as well. Off the top, what was the move that surprised you the most this past week?
It's a good question because like there was a lot of shock with the Josh Jacobs move. I wasn't as shocked as everybody else because they were linked. They were trying to trade for Jonathan Taylor last year when the contract situation wasn't great for Taylor and the Colts. Like the Green Bay Packers tried to trade for JT. I was surprised that they released Aaron Jones. Like the thing that surprised me, I think Aaron Jones is better than Josh Jacobs, but he's going to be 30. Well, he's 29 now. He's been banged up, and that's all part of it. They asked him to take a pay cut, but I mean, that's obviously a little bit surprising that Jacobs, because at first I was like, this is terrible for Josh Jacobs, right? He went from a team with the Raiders where the last 2 seasons he's been, we have a stat I like to use a lot with FTN Fantasy is it's pretty much like opportunity share, but it's percentage of snaps where a player sees either a carry or a target. And Jacobs the last 2 years has been like 41%. It's been first and third in the NFL. Like he has been getting all of the work. But that probably is right around the same range he's going to be now with Aaron Jones gone. So I wasn't as surprised. I was definitely surprised. But what surprised me more was that it led to Aaron Jones' release because I thought they would still keep him and have him in the same role he's kind of been, like 14, 15 touches, being really efficient.
Yeah, that one did surprise me. And I remember hearing those rumors, but immediately thinking, Aaron Jones, the way that he finished the season, how he played in the playoffs, longtime Packer. And I was thinking, okay, wow, it's a pretty good 1-2 punch. They let go of AJ. He's a guy that really hasn't had a lot of success near the goal line of late. I think he has like 8 rushing touchdowns over the last 3 years. So I'm like, okay, Jacobs is going to be that goal line back. But then they release him a couple hours later. And just looking at some of the numbers, this guy's been a workhorse back. Over the last 2 years, averaging 19.1 attempts. You just alluded to the opportunities per game, 19.1, and then 3.2 catches over the last 3 seasons. And just a couple years removed from leading the NFL and rushing. And I saw our guy Scott Spratt tweet this as well from FTN Fantasy and some of the data. He saw a light box in just 24% of his carries last season compared to 45% in 2022, which resulted in 4.5 yards per carry. So last year was a bit of a mess. They didn't have a quarterback to move the ball. Run block win rate non-existent really on that Raiders team. So I don't think he's going to see a lot of stack boxes in Green Bay, man, with the way that Jordan Love excelled last year.
That's the thing too. Like Jordan Love answered the call, and not that this is Kansas City, Cincinnati, Buffalo level offense, but they are an ascending offense. Like they have an ascending quarterback. LaFleur's a great play caller, and they don't have an elite wide receiver, but they have a really deep wide receiver room. So this is a good offense, and Josh Jacobs should be like, I don't see a scenario where he's outside the top 5, 6 in carries this season. So
Right.
I was trying to figure out where to we'll talk about the other players too. I tweeted it like, between all the players that just signed, like how would you rank Josh Jacobs in Green Bay now, Saquon in Philly now, Henry in Baltimore now, like there's always scenarios every free agency where like, oh, why did this player have to go here? It's not a good spot. Most of these running backs went to really good spots. DeAndre Swift, Chicago should handle most of the work. The one that is a question mark for me a little bit is Pollard, but most of these spots have been really, really good.
Yeah, they have been. And I'm just loosely putting together some rankings. And I'm a wide receiver guy off the top of drafts, but
yeah, and wide receiver like
a lot of these
is
backs.
Deep this year. Like I think it might be as deep as ever because I'm doing like an early set of rankings too last week, and I'm like, okay, this guy should go here. Then I forget we have to add the rookies soon, and they're all really good.
They are, yeah. We're gonna add like really good wide receiver rookies, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. Probably gonna go to a really good spot if he goes to Arizona with Kyler, Roma Dunze as well. And Neighbors is just, when the guy has the ball in his hands, kind of reminds me of AJ. He's just extremely explosive. So, and there's still a lot of other good wide receivers. And again, I was like pencil and paper, just kind of loosely putting some rankings. And you're right. Saquon to Philly, and which is a really good spot for him. We'll get into that. And Derrick Henry, Baltimore, right? This team runs the football better than anybody. They want to run the football. And we saw Gus Edwards have a ton of rushing touchdowns last year in this offense down the stretch.
That's the one that excites me the most.
Yeah.
Henry to Baltimore is actually more exciting for me than Saquon to Philly.
So, okay, so let's try to rank these guys because you have CMC up the top. Yeah. Jonathan Taylor is good with the Colts. We have the Breece 2 Hall. Sophomore backs, right? And you got Breece Hall there, who was great.
I think the top 3 for me is pretty clearly those 3: McCaffrey, Taylor, and Breece.
So Taylor ahead of all these guys like Henry and Saquon and Jacobs?
I would, just because like once he was fully back, because he came back after missing the first 4 or 5 weeks, was slowly mixed in. Zach Moss was still playing, and then he finally took over. Then he got hurt again a little bit. And then down the stretch, it was like back to that 2022 Jonathan Taylor workload. And the thing I talk about with the Colts, Shane Steichen's offense is so fantasy friendly. Looking at our pace tool, first in average seconds per snap at 24, and they led the NFL in no-huddle rate at 16, almost 17%. So I love the Colts offense. So yeah, I would lean Taylor, especially because like I know Anthony Richardson only played a handful of games, but for the most part, we know what to get from Taylor in that role. There's still some question marks about, Derrick Henry in the passing game, if there's going to be much of a role there, Saquon at the goal line. But I think right after that is when you start getting the discussion of the free agent running backs we saw: Saquon, Henry, Jacobs. If you ranked if you rank 3 through 5 with those next 3, I wouldn't put it past you at all. Like it's probably those 3, and then it's like Kyren Williams and maybe Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne. I think that's the range. I would honestly put the running backs we just mentioned, the free agents, definitely ahead of Gibbs, ahead of Etienne, Kyron's the one I struggle with because he was so good, and the Rams added to the interior offensive line, and they haven't added anybody next to Kyron Williams.
I know that's the thing. Like you push back guys. Like for me, I push back guys like Rashad White and ETN, Devon Chan, right? And then you have those young, the two sophomores and Robinson and Gibbs, and then you have Kyron, I guess sophomore as well.
Oh, I forgot about Bijan. Damn,
Bijan. That's what I mean. Like this time last year, for me, when I'm putting together my overall rankings, I'm like wide receiver. I'm in. Like CMC, great. I don't feel good about drafting Ekeler as RB2. I don't feel good about Bijan as RB3 that early. I was all heavy wide receiver, and I think that's the way most drafts went. Best ball is a different story, but that's how a lot of drafts went last year. Now I feel like with those three, the big names that you mentioned, the Henry and Saquon and Jacobs in good scenarios, plus the young bucks and the running backs, then you have the Taylor and the CMCs of the world. I feel like now maybe these backs will get pushed in the first round, or you're going to be able to get a guy like Kyron falls. If Kyron is falling outside of RB 8 and 9, you're getting a guy that was on the CMC pace last year in the last half of the season, got all the touches, all the opportunity. You mentioned the interior line. There's nobody else there. McVay's going to ride this guy.
And the Rams offense, when they had everybody healthy,
second round.
When the Rams had Stafford healthy, the wideouts healthy, and Kyron healthy, they were legitimately, I think, like EPA stuff, all those metrics. I think they were actually the best offense in the NFL.
Yeah, so it's wild. So, okay, what do you the best spot? You think it's Henry, the best signing? Like, maybe we don't have to call it the best signing, but do you think the best spot? If
we're not counting Kirk Cousins in the entire equation, I think, like I wrote a free agency landing spot, kind of ideal landing spot prediction article last week. And not like, I think everybody was on Henry to Baltimore. So I'm not making a crazy call, but it was obviously what I wrote about. And it's simple, right? It's the power run game, it's off tackle runs, and it's Lamar Jackson creating so much gravity. There's a reason why you look at the last couple seasons, and I wrote about it. Baltimore running backs since 2019. Gus Edwards, 2.5 yards before contact per attempt, 11th in the NFL. J.K. Dobbins in 2020, he was at 3.1. He was second in the NFL. Devonta Freeman in 2021, 2.8 yards before contact per attempt, he was fifth. Kenny and Drake the following year, 3.3, he was third. And last year, obviously a smaller sample size, but Keaton Mitchell was first. Like Derrick Henry last year with the Titans, their offensive line run blocking was terrible. He averaged, I think it was like 1.6 yards before contact per attempt. Only 454 of his 1,100 yards came before contact. And according to FTN data, he was hit in the backfield on over 27% of his carries. Like, that's all going to change in Baltimore. And then I think that's why I think format is so dependent on how you're ranking these guys, because in half PPR, I might put Henry above everybody outside of the three we mentioned because I think he could score 16, 17 touchdowns. You just mentioned Gus Edwards, who had 13 last year, led the NFL with 19 carries from inside the 5-yard line, converted them into 12 touchdowns. And the other thing we have to remember is the Ravens don't call designed runs for Lamar Jackson in close like many people might think. He has 9 total carries inside the 5 over the past 2 seasons. They give the ball to the running backs in close, and it's a good offense that moves the ball. Like, I think, and like maybe people are worried that Henry's 30 years old. I didn't see him losing much of a step. You look at his avoided tackle rate; it's right in line where it's kind of been. I think Derrick Henry. I don't even think it's like other than McCaffrey. I think he should be the favorite to lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, I would agree. Jake said 20 on his show, and he was kind of tongue in cheek. But I'm like, man,
I don't think 20 is outlandish. Like, I don't think it is. I think if he plays 16 games, 15, even if you want to say he plays 15, I think he could score 15 just, off 15, 16 games.
Well, because we saw that with Gus and even J.K. Dobbins in his rookie season. I know it was a different offense, but they still ran the ball a lot. And down the stretch, I think he had like 8 or 9 touchdowns in his final 8 or 9 games and into the playoffs as well. So, I mean, the landing spot is fantastic. It's where I kind of wanted to see him go to. And I agree with you. I don't think last year when you're looking, and a lot of people are just saying that he's dust. Oh, so much tread on the tires. It's all over for him. I mean, let's be honest about the Titans, right? I mean, the offensive line was awful.
Yeah.
Young quarterback and Will Levis, they hardly move the ball.
Here's the other thing, too.
Games, and Tajay Spears is getting some touches.
How many times do we have to, when doing, I'm sure you've done it on Mean Streets, start sit questions. It's a game with the Titans and they're 8-point favor, 8-point, they're expected to lose by 8 points on the road. Henry's going to be phased out. That's not happening in Baltimore. They have an elite defense. They have Lamar Jackson. There's not going to be many games that are down by 14, if any. So you have that on top of the overall fit with the scheme and the touchdown opportunities. Game script is going to be in Derrick Henry's favor more than almost ever, which
Yeah.
is exactly what you want from Derrick Henry.
So CMC one, you were drinking the Breece Hall Kool-Aid. You got him in the top three.
I think the top three should be McCaffrey, Taylor, and Breece.
Taylor,
If you're excited about Saquon, if you're excited about whoever, and want to put him in the top three, Bijan with Kirk there, no problem about it. No problem with that.
The thing with Breece, I mean, pretty impressive what he did last year with no Rodgers, poor quarterback play, bad offensive line, brutal offensive squad in general, hardly, past midfield. So you expect maybe the line to be a little bit better, Rodgers to be under center. I think maybe we look back at the end of his career and you say that last year was an outlier with all those catches that he had, some dump offs.
Yeah, it was the Tim Boyle dump offs down the stretch that really helped him.
It's like 13, 14
also, you look at the makeup of this offense, like they might add somebody. I'm sure they're trying to, but like their offense is literally throw the ball to Garrett Wilson, run the ball with Breece Hall, look to Garrett Wilson when you're throwing the ball. If he's not open, throw it to Breece Hall. Like that's what their offense is right now.
Yeah, they really need to bring somebody else in. I'm sure maybe potentially through the draft. Okay, so let's talk Saquon though. Do you think this is would you consider selling high in Dynasty, Saquon? I mean, everything is always about context. I mean, you didn't have a good team. You got Saquon. I mean, I already hear everything that everybody is saying. I saw you tweet it. I mean, we can bring this up. I mean, they were number one in the NFL in run block win rate in 2023. I mean, we all know that Jason Kelce is gone. The Giants were 29th last year. And I did see you tweet, and I saw our guy Scott Spratt tweet this as well. And I mean, the running back position in Philadelphia may be one of the easiest jobs in the NFL, really, behind this offensive line. Saquon was hitting the backfield 46% of his carries last season, third among qualified backs. And for DeAndre Swift, 27% of his carries in 2023, lowest rate among backs in football. Like, what a big difference between those two numbers. I mean, the last 2 years, Swift, top 5 in rushing, Miles Sanders, top 5 in rushing. Now you got Saquon. I think the only thing you could say is injuries. He's had some issues, but the ceiling, I do believe, is right there with CMC in this offense. People are going to talk about the tush push and the brotherly shove and all that stuff, but the Eagles just haven't had a back like Saquon. You're going to hand it off to Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell and Miles Sanders. I mean, no, it's like Josh Allen. Josh Allen going to get in. Jalen Hurts is going to get in. What we talked about Lamar, that doesn't happen. They're going to hand it off to Derrick Henry. I do believe that Saquon can have his best season to date in terms of touchdowns and things like that. But what do you make of him overall this year? And do you think because people last year at this time, I know they're different backs. Remember how the community got so excited about Rashad Penny? He didn't even touch the field. Yeah. They're like, Penny in this offense. Oh my goodness. Like, would you consider selling Saquon if you just needed some pieces and you weren't ready to contend?
If I have enough pieces, I'd be terrified to trade Saquon. But if I'm completely if Saquon's my only piece, then that's a different story. But listen, you're the Eagles guy, right? Like I tweeted it, like how fast, because of obviously with him playing in Penn State and growing up around the area, like how fast does that jersey sell out?
Oh, immediately.
It's going to rival like if Trout ever went to the Phillies, right? Like it's because like he's such a beloved player, and yeah, man, like the tush push is obviously interesting because DeAndre Swift has tackled at the 1 yard line 6 times last year, is the third most in the NFL. That doesn't help, obviously. But like Swift's a good player. He's not Saquon.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, Swift was he was like 2.5 yards before contact per attempt. And Saquon's going from the Giants, who in his tenure there, they've been, I think, 30th, 31st, 31st, 30th, and like 18th twice in scoring offense. So no better than 18th any season. Now he joins the Eagles, who will be elite. And it's fair to, like, the tush push should still be part of this offense because the play is so unstoppable. It is kind of fair to question if it's at the same level of effectiveness and frequency without Jason Kelce. And Jalen Hurts was banged up a lot last year. Maybe they just want to take less hits with him on those plays because I'm sure it doesn't help. Just having defenders and offensive linemen just all over. So it's going to come down to touchdowns for Saquon because I expect him, like we saw with Swift, like we saw with Miles Sanders, to be, especially because he's better than both those players, to be one of the most efficient players at the position this season. Yeah, like that in half PPR, I might lean Derrick Henry, but in full, it's Barkley, Not that the Eagles are going to throw the ball to the running backs at a massive rate, but it's going to be more, I think, than Baltimore. I just don't see how you can look at this landing spot and be anything other than excited.
Yeah, I mean, I look at his touchdowns, and they are hard to predict. And I know that's what people are going to say about Saquon, with the tush push, and they may not do it as much, to your point. And I think they can still do it successfully. I mean, the left side of that line with Lane Johnson and Mailata, and you hear people that squat, Saquon squatting 500 pounds and Jalen squatting 600 pounds, and
I didn't even
the
think
five
about
formation,
that.
all that BS stuff, right? But I look at Saquon. I mean, the touchdowns 11 in his rookie season, and then 6-0 in 2020. But of course, he only played a couple games, and then two rushing touchdowns in 13 games in 2021. Then he had the 10 in 2022, and then last year 6. But he's been a big player in the passing game, and maybe Kellen Moore a little bit more motion at the line of scrimmage, maybe some more quarterback design runs. I thought Hurts was hurt as well, but I haven't heard anything about it. I mean, he's been hush hush. Nobody's talked about it.
Well, he had the
Didn't
brace,
run as
right?
much. He had the brace for a bit, but I still thought after the season was over, like there'd be some sort of talk about it, and he just kind of brushed it all off. But yeah, we'll see what that offense looks like. But it is obviously a really, really good landing spot for Saquon Barkley. You mentioned Swift. I was surprised, honestly, with that signing. He is a good back, and he had a good season, and he touched career highs in terms of games played for one, which is great to see him play a full season. I mean, he missed the final game of the season. I think he was dealing with an illness, but 16 games career high, carries 220 career high, 1,000 rushing yards career high, 1,200 total yards, but still only finishes RB23 in fantasy. You mentioned getting stopped at the one had something to do with it. The tush push had a lot to do with it as well. Of course, the offensive line helped him out a little bit, but these numbers are great from a passing perspective. Like 49 targets, 39 catches, 214 receiving yards. That's pretty solid. Those are all career lows for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like he had over 150 catches and over 1,200 receiving yards in his first 3 seasons in Detroit. But I was surprised because I like Khalil Herbert. They drafted Rashawn Johnson. Do you think that they entered the season with all 3 of those backs? And like, how does this look? Because if Swift is the lead, he's still going to lose some touches with those guys. Is he a lock for a third down role? Because I thought Rashawn Johnson was playing that role last year, and he already
that's
lost.
What it's going to come down to.
His goal line work he lost in Detroit. So is he even a lock to get goal line work in this offense?
I think it's going to come down to those 2 things. Like I think he's getting the early work for sure. I remember week 1 where he barely played for the Eagles.
Yeah.
And then
he went off.
He started getting 20 touches and all that. I think those 20 touch days for the most part are gone. He'll probably have a couple, but I think he's going to live more in the 15 to 16 touch range, which is still fine. The offensive change, they had Luke Getsy last year. He was a proponent of running 1,000 screens, which helped. The Bears actually threw the running back position at one of the highest rates in football last year. Now they have Shane Waldron, a lot of multiple tight end sets. They just signed Gerald Everett. We expect them to have Caleb Williams. I think the offense will be good enough. It's just going to come down to, because Swift's been somebody that's been playing on third downs, getting receptions. But Rashawn Johnson's awesome in that role, especially in pass pro. So that's what it's going to come down to for me. I think Swift's, once he started to emerge last year as the clear top back in Philly, he was like a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2 most weeks. I think he's more mid to low running back 2. And I do think they probably have Herbert, Rashawn, and Swift on the roster because Foreman's a free agent, so he obviously won't be back. I think they're fine going with those 3. But, yeah, the Bears, too, they aren't the Eagles, but they, in terms of run blocking, were a lot better than people think.
Pretty solid.
So it's obviously a downgrade from Philly, but, I'll probably be ranking Swift higher than somebody like Tony Pollard.
Well, let's get into Tony Pollard. As you see here, some of the names and some of the running backs that we've hit on, Saquon to Philly, Derrick Henry to Baltimore, Josh Jacobs, Green Bay. We haven't really got into Mixon and Jones. We'll get into them in a second. DeAndre Swift, Chicago, Zach Moss, Cincinnati, Gus Edwards to LA, from Jim to John and back with Rosen, Singletary to the Giants and Gibson there, New England. This Pollard signing surprised the hell out of me. And I don't think he's a bad back. He definitely didn't live up to expectations in fantasy or what the Cowboys had for him last season. He was really, really explosive. I mean, he's explosive anyways. But I thought 2 years ago, the change of pace between him and Zeke, I just thought was fantastic. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons for him. But he had 252 carries last year, 60 more than he had in 2022, and he had fewer rushing yards, just by a couple, but he did have fewer rushing yards. Still healthy, I think, 4 yards per carry, but not as efficient. But I just felt like they already had a back like this in Tajay Spears. So I just complete opposite of Henry. I feel like what they needed was a short yardage back, ground and pound, somebody near the goal line. And now they have two of these backs that are kind of one-cut runners, explosive with the ball in their hands. Pollard coming off a career high 55 catches. So, like, how does this backfield work? And again, we just talked about why Henry struggled last year. O-line, quarterback play, bad football team. They've made some noise here in the offseason. They have been pretty busy, but like, where do you put Pollard? Like, and what do you do with Tajay Spears if you own him in Dynasty? Like, this is a bummer.
It is. I do know Tony Pollard played college football, I believe, at Tennessee, so it's a little bit of a homecoming for him. I think Tony Pollard, obviously, the immediate takeaway from everybody, especially if you drafted him in the second round of fantasy drafts and we're disappointed, the immediate takeaway is he's overrated. He's not up for it. But you have to remember, like, he wasn't fully healthy. He stated himself he wasn't fully healthy until like week 11 when they played Carolina. From week 11 on, Pollard was 5th in the NFL in avoided tackles per attempt. From weeks 1 to 10, before he stated he was fully healthy, he was 50th. So I think there's part of that too. I think what it's going to come down to, Tajay Spears was playing all the third downs last year. I think that kind of stays around the same. So that's going to hurt Pollard. And Spears did nothing to show this coaching staff and this team that he shouldn't be on the field. He was awesome last year.
Right.
So I'm trying to find like a comp of a backfield that could be similar usage. I think it's probably going to be like 60-40 in favor of Pollard, if I had to guess. And like 60-40 on a good offense is for an efficient player is fine. But I don't know if this offense is going to be good. So I have Pollard probably. I'm actually excited when all the dust settles to sit down and do rankings. I would imagine I probably have him around running back 18 to 20 something. And that, again, that would probably be lower if we had a really good rookie class. But I guess, again, that would obviously impact free agency from what we've seen. So, yeah, I think Spears is still an interesting like buy low in Dynasty if people are worried about him.
Well, see, I kind of think that they're both interesting in for buy low in Dynasty because, I mean, I have them both in the league with you now, and I'm so excited about Spears, and I had Pollard. Pollard gets signs there in Tennessee, and now it's a pain in my ass. But
it's easy, man. When the Titans are playing Kansas City and Buffalo, you just start Spears if you have to.
Yeah, fair. But both of these guys
Carolina
are going to
and whoever.
Yeah. I would agree that it's probably 60-40 and then Spears keeps that third down roll. But I mean, Pollard had, like I said, 55 grabs last year. He's explosive too. 60 red zone rushing attempts for Pollard last year, the second most in the NFL, just a couple behind CMC. He only had 6 total rushing touchdowns. He converted on 3 of his 17 carries inside the 5 and just 2 of 7 inside the 5 a couple years ago. So that's what I wonder. He struggles inside the red zone, struggles inside the 5. How many red zone rushing attempts will he even get on this squad? But I think that people are sour on him, so he could be had for cheap, and he still has, I would agree, like maybe low end RB2, upside to be a top 15 guy. So there is a buying window here, I think, for both of these guys. What do you make of Mixon and Aaron Jones? So these guys getting cut, Aaron Jones going to Minnesota and Mixon going to Houston. I mean, I really like the spot for Mixon.
Yeah, it's hard not to. So Devin Singletary kind of took over this backfield starting in week 9 last year. And from then on, he played like 70% of the snaps. He handled 70% of Houston's rushing attempts. And he averaged 19 carries per game. He was the running back 13. Like, that might be Mixon's floor if he stays healthy. Because Dameon Pierce played 2 snaps of offense in the postseason. He was literally playing on return teams. Don't think he's much of a factor. What's going to come down to for him is third downs. Mixon was hardly playing third downs in Cincinnati, but obviously different team, different coaching staff, stuff like that. It'll be interesting to see the scheme fit, a team going from a team that in Cincinnati literally ran shotgun 90% of the time to a team that's way more under center. But overall, like, there was 2 spots that we really wanted Mixon to go to after what looked like he was released. It was Houston, it was Dallas. He went to Houston. So yeah, and Houston, by the way, like, even though Stroud was amazing, and maybe that changes year 2, but they were really run heavy, especially on early downs. They were one of the most run heavy teams on early downs. So Mixon could also be in that top 5 in terms of carries by the end of the season. It'll come down to if he's playing those third downs, though. But overall, I do like the spot. There weren't many spots better that he could have landed on after the writing was on the wall with Cincinnati.
And on the flip side, Zach Moss had some really nice moments, but are we really buying that? Are we buying that he can be productive like that over a full season? Or like
They
I just
like
feel
Chase
like,
Brown. I would imagine it's
yeah, I like
it's
Chase
a
Brown
split.
too.
They could
Yeah,
add
I think
somebody.
could be a trap. They could add somebody. They could be a draft.
I think
I don't
Zach
think he's going to
Moss
go
will
too
probably.
high, anyways.
I think Zach Moss will be like a fine like 0 running back draft candidate if you're going with that approach.
Right. Yeah, I dig it. Man, I got to get more. All the running backs that we're talking about here, most of them I'm in on. Like I'm excited about them, and it's just it's a different feeling for me because, as I said, I'm pretty heavy for wide receivers, but you can get a couple really good backs here, and even if you started wide receiver, you could still, it looks like the way that drafts will unfold, maybe you get somebody if you start at the top of the board. Maybe you're a 2 or 3 spot, you get a CeeDee Lamb, a Tyreek, JJ, one of these guys, and then on the way back, you can maybe grab 2 or 3, maybe ETN all of a sudden now is a third pick in the middle of the round, things like that. And I know Doug Peterson talked about scaling him back, but we did hear that last year as well, and that just really wasn't the case. I think they probably should, but we'll see what happens. Maybe a little bit more for Tank Bigsby. What do you make of Ekeler? Anybody else on this list that you wanted to? Ekeler, I mean, Gus Edwards too. I will see what the Chargers do in the draft if they bring somebody in. But as I mentioned, John to Jim, I think I may have mixed that up, but John to Jim, and then Greg Roman, of course, was in Baltimore, and now he's in LA. And what we expect is a lot of running in LA. And I know a lot of people are super down on Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I mean, as of today, Gus Edwards looks pretty interesting. They will definitely add somebody. Maybe they go and just get Dobbins too, and just have a massive reunion. But I mean, at least for now, he's a little bit interesting. Ekeler, the funny thing is, when I was writing about the free agent running backs and landing spots, I almost wrote Washington for him, but I was like, "There's no way. Like this isn't going to happen." I don't think it's as bad as many people think. The problem is, like, he's definitely playing third down. It's not even a question.
Yeah.
The question for me is Ekeler, most touchdowns in the NFL over the past handful of seasons. Is he getting the goal line work? And obviously the offense won't be as good. I think they're going to throw a lot, though. They threw a lot last year. They have Cliff there. So if they're throwing a lot, that's better for Ekeler. Man, though, like, I also struggle to, differentiate him getting up there in age and showing what he showed on tape a lot last year, and the fact that he had a high ankle sprain for a lot of the season. So right. I think it's somewhere in between. Eckler's obviously like he's not going to be, he's been a first round pick the last couple seasons. I think he's probably somebody I'm only targeting in full PPR at this point because they
Ekeler
obviously like
Pollard or Ekeler Swift. Rank Ekeler, Pollard, and Swift.
I would probably put Swift first. In full PPR, I would go Swift, Ekeler, Pollard, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. I mean, catches are still going to be there for him, right? The catches won't be there for Brian Robinson Jr., which was surprising at times. Last year they were. And Antonio Gibson, as you saw on this board, over to New England. I think he should just go back to being a wide receiver, dude. Like, why not? Like, let's go back to being a wide receiver.
Well, if they don't manage to sign Calvin Ridley, they might have to put him there.
They might have to. I did.
Motor's kind of interesting too. Like, Motor's one of my favorite players in the entire league.
Yeah.
There was a report that came out, I think it was today actually, that they're trying to add a veteran running back as well. So obviously the offense is bad, the offensive line getting some help, but still looks to be bottom tier. But right now, I mean, that running back depth chart behind Devin Singletary is pretty bad. So 15 touches per game, he's going to be relevant again. And I've always been a huge fan of his. Like, if you're a Giants fan, by week 2, no, not even week 2, by the preseason training camp, you're going to love Devin Singletary. I can promise you that.
There's still some names out there that you mentioned. Zeke, Deontay Foreman.
You know who could use Zeke right now?
Yeah, Dallas. They'll probably bring him back cheap, maybe. Kareem Hunt, AJ Dillon. There's some pass catching backs out there as well. Jerick McKinnon's one guy.
You know what I want?
What?
It's not going to be really fantasy relevant, but I wrote about it. Cordell Patterson, who's a free agent. Yeah. Buffalo Bills.
Buffalo Bills. Okay.
Keep an eye on that
player. Keep an eye. Does it matter to you right now? We don't know who the quarterback is in Minnesota. I mean, they got Sam Darnold when they draft a guy. I don't know. It seems like they have a lot of cap space for next year. I don't know, to make a big move. Does it matter? Like, is right now knowing Cousins isn't the quarterback, is Justin Jefferson still like, where does he rank for you? And what about Aaron Jones? I mean, the O-line was awful last year.
Jefferson pretty easily behind CeeDee Lamb.
Number two, would you put Tyreek ahead of him?
I would put him behind Lamb, Tyreek, and Chase, especially if T. Higgins gets traded. I think you can debate Amon-Ra. He's still going to be top 5, though. Like, at worst, he'll be 5 for me. He's too good. He was still productive with Mullins. Granted, Mullins played some really bad defenses when he had that massive stretch of throwing for a ton of yards, but Darnold is good enough if he's the guy to get Justin Jefferson his. Jefferson will get his regardless. And, like, they're at, 11 in the draft? Like, maybe J.J. McCarthy's there for them. Like, they'll be, like, Jefferson will be fine. If I'd worry more about a second-year breakout from Jordan Addison at this point now. But Jefferson, like, the only reason he's going down to, like, 4, maybe 5 for me is because CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Tyreek, like, they're amazing, and there's no question marks at quarterback for them. But, yeah, I don't see any scenario where he's worse than, like, 5th for me.
I think Mullins had like 800 yards in the 2 games against Detroit, and as you mentioned, JJ went off as well. So Kirk Cousins, I think, is the best signing, right? I think it's exactly what Atlanta needed. Last year, they had 17 passing touchdowns, 17 in 17 weeks. Cousins had 18 in 8 weeks before he ruptured his Achilles. And there's some familiarity here too, with this new coaching staff, right? They got the OC in Atlanta now. Zach Robinson comes over from the Rams with Raheem Morris. Both guys worked under Sean McVay. Kevin O'Connell last year with the Vikings calling plays, also under the Sean McVay coaching tree. So expect much of the same, maybe some, middle of the field targets under play action, things like that. And they also signed Darnold and Mooney. So I know people are going to get excited about Kirk Cousins and this offense and Drake London. Jake is calling Drake London a top 10 wide receiver already. Like, these are the takes that people are going to have. Kyle Pitts back into the conversation. And then when we were talking about running backs, we were like, yeah, Bijan Robinson, right? Like, it's not Arthur Smith anymore. Like, this dude should get touches. He should get goal line work. It's not going to be Tyler Algier. I don't think getting 10.7 carries per game or whatever he got down the stretch of the season. So how excited are you for the Falcons? Are you drinking the Kool-Aid? Are you in on London as a top 15 guy?
Most likely. I won't go as high as like top 12, top 10 just because the position is so loaded. And like for instance, like I would rank, if Marvin Harrison Jr. goes to Arizona, I would rank Marvin Harrison ahead of him. Maybe I don't think that should be bold.
I don't think that's a hot take. I think it's a fair take.
But yeah, like this is obviously this is like the same scenario as last year with Garrett Wilson when the Jets traded for Rodgers, right? It's the obvious breakout candidate wide receiver. We talked about Scott Spratt, who does amazing work. Tweeted this out about the Cousins signing. So according to FTN Fantasy, this is per Scott Spratt, by the way. Kirk Cousins, 5.8% inaccurate pass rate, second best in the NFL. That's a massive upgrade from what the Falcons have had at quarterback the past couple seasons.
Yeah.
And according to FTN data, Kyle Pitts, like just 64%, I believe, of his targets were deemed catchable last year. To put that into perspective, TJ Hawkinson last year, who obviously didn't play with Cousins the whole year because both got hurt, but he was over 80% catchable pass rate. So it's just the offense will be better. Cousins is somebody that just puts up 4,200 yards and 30 touchdowns every year. So if he does that again in an offense, it's going to be more pass heavy. It's going to, like you mentioned with Zach Robinson, more 11 personnel. I think we're going to see this is going to be way more friendly of an offense. So yeah, I mean, Drake London is probably going to go at latest third round of every draft. And while I won't push him to top 10, most likely, he'll probably be, I wouldn't, like, I actually went through this exercise yesterday. Like, we know the guys that'll definitely be out of him, right? Lamb, Chase, Jefferson, Tyreek Hill. I still would have Stefon Diggs, Devontae Adams. But then it's like the guys that broke out last year, too, are they still ahead of him? Is Michael Pittman still ahead of him? Would you have Mike Evans, not breakout, but Mike Evans was great with Baker, and they're both back together now. Would you still have him ahead of him? Nico Collins, they haven't added a receiver yet. Would you have him ahead of him? Like, I don't think it's as clear-cut easy to put Drake London in the top 12 with this move as many people might think, just because A, there's always great wide receivers. B, a lot of wide receivers broke out and emerged as top 15 options last year. And again, C, the rookie class. So he'll be top 15-ish, but yeah, the obvious breakout is there.
Yeah, you still have some guys in that range too, like Chris Olave. Rasheed Rice was great down the
I
stretch
actually
of
made
the
a trade
season.
in our Dynasty League yesterday. I traded Olave for London, and it was like the second pick of the third round. I have them pretty similar in Dynasty at this point, so I was like, screw it, I'll take the extra third, see what I can do. But yeah, like there's that top 15, it's stacked, and it's not even counting Marvin Harrison and Rome Odunze and all the rookies.
Right, and wherever they're going to go. Yeah, and you said it 30. I mean, it's exactly. He's averaging 29 passing touchdowns in the previous 8 seasons before this past year. So Cousins can sling it. It's great for the offense. I'm excited about everybody, even
Gonna
Kyle
be
Pitts.
playing
Right?
indoors.
Indoors, right? Division's still pretty weak.
The only thing I don't
And
like is the Falcons defense is like low key kind of decent.
it is.
But
It is
still.
low key kind of decent, and the O line is strong too. Yeah, it should be a pretty fun year in Atlanta. There's no question about that. And Kirk Cousins was quarterback 8 in fantasy points per game last season before he went down, and he's always
He
a guy
was
that just goes
really,
outside the
really,
top
really
15.
good last year. Before
He was phenomenal. I know a lot of people just say, he's got one playoff win in 12 years, but dude, like he
don't
was
care.
Great
I'm not a Falcons fan. I don't care. Like,
yeah, you just wanted to be productive in your fantasy squad. I don't know how many shares I'll have of Cousins, and I mean we could talk about
he's probably the same quarterback he's been. He's going to be a low end quarterback 1, high end quarterback 2. It's going to obviously
will get drafted outside of the top 12 again.
Yeah,
he
easy.
Will. Yeah, every year he does. Very, very strong number 2 in Superflex or even a number 1, and you can go that way. Russell Wilson was the other guy that the other quarterback that left. There's been some other quarterbacks that have moved, mostly backups. I think I saw Trubisky back with you guys, Gardner Minshew with, when I say you guys, the Bills. Everybody knows that if they know Pfeifer. The Raiders with Gardner Minshew, Sam Darnold there to Minnesota, Jacoby Brissett to New England, Marcus Mariota to Washington, which I think is just very telling that Jaden Daniels is going to go to Washington. In my opinion, anyways. And then what do you make of Russ? Anything? Deontay Johnson went to Carolina, so they got a wide receiver who could separate now, which was certainly their issue last season. Nobody could do that. And then Russ, is he going to be able to unlock George Pickens? I'm sure that they're going to be in the conversation for drafting a wide receiver as well. But Russ he had a really good season last year. 26-8 touchdown interception ratio, 66% completion rate. Remember the Broncos beat teams like Kansas City, Buffalo, Green Bay. He got benched not because he was awful. Contract for sure. Now he goes to a team that I think will still be pretty run heavy with Najee and then Warren. But does Russ do anything for you when it comes to George Pickens? Like, is he now?
Yeah.
Cortland Sutton was relevant last year.
Yeah, Russ doesn't do much for me in terms of Russ for fantasy. And then obviously it only solidified after the Steelers traded Deontay Johnson yesterday. But Russell Wilson and George Pickens are a perfect match. Like the Steelers a little bit kind of started to change the routes from Pickens after Matt Canada was let go, because literally he was just running go routes. And he still mostly ran go routes. I think like 25% of his targets came off go routes according to FTN data. And that's what Russ wants to do, right? It's why he wasn't good in his first year in Denver. They didn't get Russ outside the pocket. They didn't run play action. They tried to force him to throw in the middle of the field. I don't think that's what you're going to do with Russell Wilson. So George Pickens, yeah, he's a massive upgrade on top. He was already somebody I was high on after they signed Russ. And then only, they're going to definitely draft a receiver, maybe in the first round now. But yeah, I mean, I think George Pickens has, top 15 upside as long as Russ is decent. And like his numbers look good last year, but that offense from Denver with Sean Payton was totally different. There's a lot of short dink and dunk check down stuff. I think it's going to be a little bit conservative with, like you mentioned, running the football, playing good defense, and taking shots on the field. The difference, though, this is a good opportunity for them to expand the usage of George Pickens with Deontay gone. Let him run more routes. Let him be the focal point of the offense. Give him scheme targets. I'm excited to see that. But I think overall the pairing from the skill sets between the two is absolutely perfect.
I bought Pickens a couple weeks ago for a 3rd-round pick in Dynasty. I thought that they would get an upgrade at the quarterback position. I didn't actually think it was going to be Russ because
I did. Wrote
I
about it.
felt like he just wouldn't want to go there because it's the toughest division, I think, in football, and it's some good defenses. I thought maybe he would pick. I mean, who knows how many teams were even calling him, right? So I just thought if he had a choice and maybe the Falcons were interested in him, he'd be like, that's a better chance to go win football games. Still got some good weapons there as well. But I think Arthur Smith may be good for him. I mean, say what you want about Arthur Smith, but a lot of quarterbacks like play action in their life. And I was just taking a look at last year with the Falcons. They happened to run second highest play action percentage in the NFL. And Russ last year on play action passes an 80 QBR and 7.4 yards per attempt compared to 60 QBR and just over 6 on non-play action. So, I mean, it does seem like it'll be maybe
It's literally why Russ
offense.
was like Russ. Don't get me wrong, Russ is not a top tier quarterback anymore.
No,
but that is a huge reason why he was so bad his first year in Denver. They did not run play action. They literally brought in Russell Wilson. They made this massive trade, this contract, everything and they didn't even play to his strengths. It made no sense.
Yeah.
It was obvious. We know how hilariously bad that Broncos team was his first year. And again, I think Russ is somewhere in between. Like, I think he's like the Derek Carr range of quarterbacks. I think he's probably like slightly above that, which is fine and enough for George Pickens to be good and for hopefully, Pat Freiermuth to be good or whoever they add.
Yeah, and the defense is good, and this team with Tomlin,
they just added Patrick Queen. They should be really, really good.
Oh yeah, the Patrick Queen signing is fantastic. I'm surprised I went over to the Ravens fans can't be happy about that one.
A lot of rival stuff going on.
There is a lot of rival stuff, and hey, man, money talks. But also Mason Rudolph looked pretty good in this offense last year, right? So at times getting him into the playoffs and playing a playoff game. So this is an upgrade and literally a buy low. 1.2 million is a veteran contract. Anything else before we get out of here? We got Judy to Cleveland, Deontay Johnson, Carolina, Mooney and Gabe Davis get the biggest contracts. It tells you a little bit about the wide receiver class in free agency. 39 million each for those guys over 3 years, 13. Duvernay also went to Jacksonville. Devontae Parker, I mean, he might be the best number 3 the Eagles have had at the wide receiver position in years, which is not saying a whole lot. Jonathan Smith, Gerald Everett, don't love the spot there. Mike Gesicki, Cincy, Colby Parkinson's on this list because he got paid the most out of any tight end.
I mean, he might be the starting tight end week 1 because Higbee tore his ACL late.
I was going to say that Higbee's a couple brutal tight end injuries towards the end of last season. Higbee certainly one of them. Hawkinson, another guy there as well. What are the Jags getting in Gabe Davis?
So obviously, like from a fantasy perspective, everybody knows Gabe Davis. He's going to be 25 fantasy points or 5. And there was 4 occasions actually where he didn't catch a pass last year. We'll see. I mean, we got 3 hours until 3-ish hours probably until we get some sort of update on Calvin Ridley. It sounds like he and Jacksonville are working towards something. I mean, Gabe Davis is probably somebody you draft at the very end of your draft if Ridley returns. If not, he's a slight downgrade just because the offense and the quarterback's a downgrade, but he's the same player. He's going to run vertical routes, clear out routes, and make some plays down the field. But from a Jacksonville perspective, great teammate, elite in terms of wide receiver run blocking. So I think it helps the running backs.
Yeah.
But I think he's kind of the same player. He's going to be a best ball candidate most often. He's going to make some splash plays, and he's going to have some games where he has, 2 catches for 21 yards.
Yeah, it's like the fantasy community. It's just been a roller coaster, right? I mean, with the 4 touchdown game against the Chiefs, and then everyone overdrafted him, and then they underdrafted him. But I thought he had a very similar season that he did, 2 years ago, right? There was some highs and lows, but at the end of the day, he was still kind of finishing around a wide receiver 3, low end wide receiver 3. So we'll see, what the Jags do. We'll get you out of here on this. Diggs, you said I think you alluded to him being still, in the low end wide receiver 1 conversation. Man, I'm seeing some people pretty hard on him in rankings, like wide receiver 20, 25. Like that just seems crazy to me. That's nuts.
I know
right?
He was bad after the offensive change. They ran the ball more, but like his overall target share was still like elite.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand if you want to move him to like 10, 11, 12, maybe 20 to 25 is absolutely absurd.
I'll have a lot of Diggs if he's gonna be my wide receiver. So listen, 3, I win a lot of leagues. Maybe
it wasn't the production or the drop in production wasn't because he's suddenly a bad football player. Defenses, all they did, they had safety coverage over the top, and they took away the middle routes because the Bills kind of stopped running RPO. A lot of the plays were Diggs made his living were the RPO quick slants. They took that away. They shaded inside. The defensive backs would shade inside, and they would have safety help over the top. And that's why you saw James Cook and Dalton Kincaid get more involved in the second half. It's why you saw Khalil Shakir in the second half get more involved. The Bills will work on a way to get their best football player on offense of the football. Josh Allen will make sure of it. Again, totally understand with how loaded I've talked about this wide receiver position being. If you want to move him from consensus top 5 wide receiver to like 10, 11, whatever. That's probably a little bit low for me, but that's fine. But
I still think he's an elite wide receiver, and I still think he has wide receiver 1 upside. I mean, there's no question about that. You think the Bills bring in another wide receiver, or is this like
they better
more opportunity for Shakir?
I mean, they brought in Matt Collins. It's going to be more of like a 4th wide receiver. He's good on special teams. I want A.D. Mitchell from Texas in the draft. I think the Bills, unless they do something with like Hollywood Brown or somebody that's left in free agency, I would also love Curtis Samuel. Unless they do something like that, probably see them sign a 1-year, a second 1-year veteran wide receiver deal, and then maybe double dip in the draft, like first round and then later, because the draft is so loaded. But the Bills have, obviously have other positions they have to address now. Safety. I think they still need a backup running back at this point because I think Latavius and Damon Harris are both free agents, which is why I want Cordero Patterson. So they should add. It's not the question isn't will they add a receiver? It's how many, because I think they should add multiple.
You mentioned there's some names still out there. Curtis Samuel's a good one. Tyler Boyd's out there. Hunter Renfrow was just released.
That's who I thought the Eagles would target. Tyler Boyd,
I thought so as well. OBJ, some lesser names, MVS, DJ Chark in there as well.
The most interesting to me is Curtis Samuel, and everybody's talking about the Chiefs. From 2 teams that I don't like very much, but the fits are perfect. It's Kansas City and Miami. I would actually love to see Curtis Samuel in Miami. That team so desperately needs somebody after Tyreek and Jalen Waddle to make plays, and with his versatility, he'd be a perfect fit in Mike McDaniel's offense. So the Dolphins have like no cap right now, so that's part of the problem. But
no cap, and they're losing guys, man. They've had a rough go.
Their offseason's been worse than Buffalo's. Everybody's talking about Buffalo losing players. Miami's it's been rough.
Some really good players for sure. Dude, appreciate it, man. It was really good to chop it up. You and I are in communication all the time, but it's just really good to get in here and talk some of these free agents. And let's do this again soon. Off the top of your head, is there like a 1 or 2 players for the Dynasty people that you're trying to? I know you said you've been making a lot of trades. Is there 1 or 2 guys you're trying to buy, whether it's buy low or you're drinking the high offer or asking price for certain players?
It's not like it kind of fits into what we just finished talking about. It's not like a top tier player. And again, they will address the position, but go try to trade for Khalil Shakir. He's really good. He showed in the playoffs. He is going to be their full-time slot wide receiver at this point of the season. And like, even if it's not this massive breakout this year, like Stefon Diggs is 30. They don't have much else that's really reliable. And obviously they're hoping more from Kincaid, but man, like
link to Josh Allen.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to ultimately. But like what he showed when because remember, Gabe Davis got hurt in the beginning of that Miami game in Week 18 for the division, didn't play in the entire playoffs. Khalil Shakir he was their best player on offense for a lot of those instances. He was really, really good, working back to the football to help Josh Allen, making tough catches, really good against zone coverage, which the Bills are going to face a lot when you have Josh Allen. I'm trying to, and it's tough when I'm trying to trade for him because I follow the Bills more than anybody, so it's like, what does he know? Yeah. But I like if you're looking for somebody a little bit under the radar, I would try to trade for Khalil Shakir.
Love it, dude. Adam Pfeifer 24, Pfeifer 24 on the Twitter machine. Give him a follow. Always tweeting out some good stuff. We'll chop it up again soon, dude. Thanks for this. And if you guys have any questions, hit us up and enjoy what has been a crazy week. And I'm sure will be some more crazy moves here in the NFL in the few days to come. And we'll be with you covering some NFL draft stuff on our YouTube page as well. So subscribe, like, and we will talk to you guys soon. Cheers.